Okay, we're going to download the stems from D2L. Guitar stems replace the stems that I had forgot to amp model. Oopsie, wrong stuff. So downloaded those. Here's the folder for the guitar stems. I'm going to place those inside of my audio files for my Pro Tools project so that the stems are living in the audio files folder and I don't have problems. So boom, those are there. I'm opening up my Pro Tools session. In the meantime, hopefully all my tracks are in place. They are. Everything looks good. I'm going to find my 3 guitars. So I have guitar 1, 2, and 3. And these were just raw, it's like just raw DI guitar. Okay, why don't I have any sound? Let's see what's up here. Oh, that's why. Okay, this should work now. Sorry guys. Issues with screenshot recording while you're mixing. So obviously you can hear it's dry guitar, no distorted amp tone or anything. So we're going to drop those in there from this previous session, or this stems folder. There they are. Push them up against the front and everything should sound like it's lined up ideally. Okay, cool. Awesome. Instant JCM 800 amp tone without having to buy a JCM 800 amp and crank it up in your living room with mics around it all day. Not bad. You guys check out this amp modeling stuff. It's not too bad, you know. For a distorted guitar, I don't know, I can't always tell the difference between amp modeling and an actual amp, but saves you a lot of time dialing in tones and picking amps that you don't own, you know, and having models of them. So at this point, we've got the correct guitar stems in here. We have begun our mixing process and kind of gone through half of the drum kit to sort of process and EQ the individual drum tracks. So let's continue our mixing process. Just to hear where we're at with the drum set and kind of get an idea of what we got going on as far as sounds at this point, I'm going to solo all of the drums and listen to just drums, just the drum kit. Now, if you guys remember last time, I created a drum group. So this is a process that allows you to kind of, it saves you time when you're like, I want to listen to all the drums, and I have like 30 drum tracks or 15 drum tracks, right? And I don't want to go around here and click individually, solo, 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 18 times, right? I can have my drum group selected, which means whatever I do to one of the drum tracks, I do to all the drum tracks. So if I want to like bring the faders down just a couple dB because I'm hitting my compressor on my drum sum track a little too hot, I can do that with all the faders simultaneously. I can solo all the drums simultaneously and listen to them, all together. Then if I want to individually, mess with the drums, I can disable that selection of the drum group, and then I can work individually on individual sounds and do stuff like that. So grouping tracks together allows you to kind of like quickly, I want to hear only guitars, but I have 8 guitar tracks, I group the guitars together, and then I can solo all the guitars at once, move all the faders around at once, and then deselect that, and then readjust the faders, and then move them all together. So it's just kind of a tool that allows you to do things to groups of instruments all at the same time. So solo the drums and listen, see where I'm at with the drum kit, how it's sounding. Cool. I mean, the drums already sound pretty darn good. I'm going to listen to the individual sounds just to reacquaint myself with the drums and just kind of hear kick, snare, and just work through it and then like see where we left off. So, yeah.
Is there a setting that's making, every time I click on my drum group, it takes me back to the mix window automatically?
Yeah, so what's going on is you only have the drum group showing on your edit window. To get it to show up on your mix window as well, you're going to, down here in the bottom left corner, there's this little arrow out symbol. It's way down at the very, very bottom left corner. If you click that, it expands a window on the left side where you have your track list as well as your groups, so that you don't have to bounce back and forth. So I'm just going to listen to kicks here. Check out the kick. Got a pretty strong signal. My kick's hitting -5 dB, so that's pretty hot. Good with the kick. Let's listen to my snares. Okay, my kick's coming in a little bit soft here. I got my kick in oh, here it is. Yeah, kick sum. It's about, it's a little bit closer to 5. -5 dB on my meter, so I've got just as healthy of a signal on my snare as I do on my kicks. So kick and snare. Pretty balanced. I got my boom chick going pretty well there. So basically, I think that's where we stopped. I think the last thing I did was like, hey, let's listen to kick and snare, boom chick, blah, blah, blah. So let's go ahead and continue. So the next thing we have is the hi-hat mic. Yeah.
How do you get it to switch from like grouping and like making it singular again?
Okay, so down in that group window, if you see it on the bottom left corner,
I got that.
you select it to have the group engaged to where one thing affects the whole group. Or if you deselect this right here, that drum group, you can work individually.
Okay.
So you have to engage it to like be able to do something to all the tracks at once in that group.
Gotcha.
Yep. So yep. Cool. Onward and upward. So we've got the overhead, we've got the Octava mic here on the hi-hat, which I'm just thinking hi-hat mic. What's it sit next to? Snare, kick. We probably got some bleed coming in there. We could probably trim off the lower frequencies of that mic because they're not hi-hat frequencies. So that means what kind of filter and what whereabouts as far as the the frequency would I roll stuff off?
High pass filter, and then maybe roll off everything below 500.
Yeah, not a bad start. Let's do that. So I've got my EQ plugin up on the first insert. I'm going to engage my high pass filter, and I'm going to make kind of a steeper Q, so I have kind of a pretty harsh roll off. I'm going to solo that, listen to it, see what I got in there, just raw. So I get a lot of kick, I'll get a lot of snare. I'm going to start rolling off. The way I do this is I listen for the hi-hat. I start rolling off until I hear the hi-hat's tone change. And that's when I know I've gone to the point to where I'm affecting the hi-hat. I don't want to affect the hi-hat's tone necessarily. I really just want to get rid of this extra shit that shouldn't be there, like kick and snare and bleed that's in that lower register. So I'm just going to listen real hard to hi-hat. So right about there, right about 500, 400, I start to hear like my hi-hat change. So I feel like that's a kind of a zone right there. My hi-hat still sounds like a hi-hat, but I've rolled off a lot of the kick and the snare tone that's in there. Now, the hi-hat's got a sizzly kind of hiss to it, right? What frequency do you think is the main hiss frequency?
14?
14K?
Yeah.
That's pretty high up there. There's probably some stuff up there. What's that frequency that's like the harshest, like nasty? 4K, right? So I'm thinking like, around 4 to 15K, there's probably some really good sizzle that I might want to enhance to make that crispier. So I'm going to use a notch filter, make it kind of narrow with the Q, and I'm going to fish around here for that frequency, the sizzly bite of the hi-hat. I'm kind of liking what I hear at 10 and 4. So I might do a little boost at 4 and then do a little, well, maybe a different one. I'll do a little boost at 4 and a little boost at 10. I kind of like those two frequencies. Subtly, I'm not going crazy, but I am going to set up a couple pretty narrow notch filters here and boost those frequencies at, maybe boost them about 3 to 4 dB. Give them a healthy little kick right there. And see what I got when I go and disable my plugin. So there's no plugin, no filtering. There's filtering. Snare doesn't change too much. It just gets a little bit crispier, I think. A little bit more pronounced. So, yeah, I might just chill with that. I don't know about compressing the hi-hat. Maybe I could. I could try it. Let's just throw a little compression on that hi-hat and see what it sounds like. What the heck? Probably a quicker attack or just a quick and then slow it down to get some of the bite, add, some attack, quick release, and then see what it sounds like, A and B. No plug-in, no compression. Compression. Not a whole lot of a difference. I don't know. I think it's okay. Whatever. I'll come back to that later and balance it out with the rest of the drum kit. Moving on, we got toms. We got rack tom. We got floor tom. A funny thing about toms is you set up a mic on an instrument that gets hit like 3 times during the song, and the rest of the time it just bleeds all the other sounds from all the other instruments around the drum kit. So it's kind of a funny thing to do. You can kind of gate kick, or like you can gate a tom drum pretty easily and get rid of all the extra noises that exist until the tom actually gets played. Let's see here though. I'm looking at the tom mic, floor tom. Okay, so what makes a gate work? What do I have to have for a gate to work properly? So if I'm looking at a track and I'm like, I could maybe use a gate here. What tells me that I could maybe get away with putting a gate rather than just not being able to use a gate?
You have to look at like the amplitude of the track.
Exactly, yeah. Look at the amplitude of those waves. If there's like whenever I hit the tom is a big transient that pops up, and everything else is kind of a smaller one, there's a good separation between the bleed and the actual tom being hit. And then if I use the gate, it would just turn the track off until the tom was hit, and then it go boing, and then turn off again. So it's like me trimming off all of the audio in between tom hits and cleaning up that mic, just without doing all that physical labor. So I think we might be able to do that. There's just 57s on toms here, so they're probably pretty loud. There you go. There's the rack tom, floor tom. So totally, let's do gate. Let's do it on both of them. I'm probably going to do it on one and then copy that gate over that plugin so I don't have to do the same process twice and just make sure it's good. So I'm on the rack tom here on the first insert. I'm not going to worry about EQing the toms. I don't really give too much of a care about tom tone. It's either sounds like a tom or it doesn't sound like a tom. I'm not a drummer, so I'm not going to get crazy about that. In the dynamics category, I'm looking for the gate. And I'm just going to go ahead and find a place in my song where there is a pretty strong drum tom use in this section right here. I'll just kind of highlight that and hit play, and it'll loop. If I have my play knob set to loop mode. So if you look at your play button here on your transport, maybe you guys don't see the full-on expanded transport. You probably see this. You see your play button? If it has a little loop symbol around it, it's going to automatically loop whatever you hit play and select. If it doesn't have that loop symbol, you can right-click on that play button and turn on the loop mode, which allows you to just loop a section of audio that you've highlighted. So you can just go over and over that tom hit over and over again and set your gate properly. Okay, cool. So where am I at? Okay, so I'm on floor tom right now. I'm going to grab a gate on my floor tom track. Okay, boom. So I need to turn my threshold down, or up, actually. It's a really strong signal coming from that floor tom. And I want my attack to be pretty quick. And wow, that's so loud. I'm kind of confused why my signal is so strong from that tom. I might have to somehow lessen the input of okay, cool. All right, here we go. So I need to turn the input down into this plugin. It's just too hot. The signal is like, you saw my threshold is set at like 0 dB almost, just to get the thing to shut down. So I'm going to turn right here on the input level meter on the left side here under levels. I can turn the input level, I think, of the plugin, of the signal coming into the plugin down. Let's see if that does something. Okay, that's not input level. All right, plan 2. Yeah, just turn, well, check this out. This is basically your threshold knob. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw on an EQ first. And on my EQ, I have an input and output level. I'll probably use EQ anyway, maybe just to get rid of some of the, I don't know, listening to this track by itself, what could I carve out? Highs or lows? Not quite sure. Yeah, I think the highs is probably a good thing to get rid of. Maybe even some of the low lows too. Yeah, really, it's kind of a low tone drum anyway. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'm going to turn the levels down on my output. You can see how strong that tom is out of the output. It's peaking the meter. So I'm going to turn my output down probably by like 5 dB or more, just so the signal isn't so hot when it hits my gate, and I can actually set my threshold to be at a reasonable level. Find a tom hit in here. You know what? Let's, oh, here it is. There we go. There's a tom hit. Okay, so this is kind of working. It's kind of working. I changed my hold time to be pretty long. So my hold is set to be 518 milliseconds. I got my threshold set like at -6 dB. My attack is as fast as it goes. And I have a EQ going before that plugin that I brought the output gain down by 6 dB. So some of the snare hits are creeping through, but my tom sounds pretty strong, and it has a longer sound to it. So that's really the most I could do, I think, other than just leaving the mic open and letting the bleed happen. Sometimes just fine. Drum sets are full of bleed. That's just naturally part of having a bunch of mics on the same instrument with a bunch of different instruments combined. It's just kind of the reality of it. So it's not like you got to do this. It's just something I'm trying to do to see if I can make these tools work and, you know, show you guys how the tools work if they do work. So I think the rack tom might be a little bit easier. Going to the rack tom, I've got a lot of bleed for sure. So I'm going to try the EQ thing first. I'm going to put an EQ. Actually, I'm going to copy my EQ and my gate over so that I can save myself a little bit of time. To copy plugins, you hold down Option, drag them over to the next slot, and that's a way of duplicating the plugin. And see what happens. So it's working pretty good out of the box. That's actually not bad. That whole setup I had with the floor tom is working pretty good on my rack tom too. I'm not getting a whole lot of bleed, and I'm still getting the full tone, the full envelope of my tom hit. Boing! That's all I need. You know? I just need the boing, because it's going to be picked up in the overheads. So I've got the tom, I got the whole drum kit in 2 mics. The 2 overheads, that's the whole drum kit. Everything else just kind of emphasizes those instruments and brings them up a little bit, makes them a little bit more punchy. So it's not like I have to do this, but it's working. Now I can control my tom volume a little bit easier in my whole mix. And I can pan these bad boys a little bit too. So floor tom was on the far right side of the drummer, so I'm going to pan that over. And my rack tom is maybe just a little bit off the center. And my hi-hat too. If I think about the perspective of the drummer, the hi-hat's on the left side, so I'm going to put the hi-hat just a touch over on the left side. Not too far. So I've got kick and snare in the center. I've got hi-hat on a little bit to the left. I've got tom, rack tom 1 a little bit to the right, and then floor tom 1 further pan to the right. And then here I am on overheads. Overhead time. Sweet. So I've got overhead left and right. First thing I'm going to do is pan them hard left and right so I get the stereo effect. Hit play. Honestly, those mics sound so good. Like, the whole drum set could be captured with just 2 mics. Those Neumanns and those SSL preamps, it just sounds awesome. Like, it's all there. The kick, the snare, the whole body, the room. It just sounds awesome. So, with overheads, a lot of times what you can do, because their purpose mainly is to get the cymbal sounds, right? I could do a high-pass filter. I could carve out some of the lower frequencies and use the individual mics to emphasize that stuff. And then I can also compress pretty heavily my overheads. A lot of people will do that, like heavy compression on the overheads, or maybe just a parallel channel that I put stupid heavy compression on, and I mix that in with the rest of my drum kit. That's called like parallel compression. It's kind of a mixing technique a lot of people use on, like, you know, rock drums and stuff. They'll take the overheads, which have the cymbals in them, carve out the low stuff, and then they'll just compress them and squash the hell out of them. And then they'll bring that in next to the drum set sound, so it sounds like urgency and just like more grit, more just like, wah! It's that wall of sound kind of thing. So, you guys want to do that? See what we like and mix it in parallel with the original overheads? Okay, cool. So let's do that. So basically what we're going to have to do is duplicate the overhead. Well, we don't have to duplicate. We can do this 2 ways. We could create another auxiliary input track, and we could call it the overhead parallel compression track. We'll use it within our drum collection of drum tracks, but have its output go to the drum sum. Okay, so follow me on this. Go ahead and select one of your last overhead tracks. We're going to use Command Shift N to create one stereo auxiliary input track. It pops right next to your overheads. I'm going to call it overhead. Let's do. I'll call it drum capital I, which is like the symbol for parallel. You see that up there? So drum II. I'm going to solo save it because you got to do that with auxiliary input tracks. I'm going to set its output to be going to the drum bus. So its output is going to be drum bus because it's part of the drum family. I'm going to create a new input for this auxiliary input track. I'm going to choose the next available stereo bus, which happens to be 1314 on my machine. I'm going to rename that stereo bus so I know what it is. I'm going to rename that. I'll call it parallel bus. So the parallel symbol and then bus. There we go. Why not? And I'm going to set... Okay, check this out. So I want to keep my original overhead sound, but I want to have this other version of the overheads coming out as well. So rather than setting the outputs of my overheads to go into this parallel track, which would just take all of the drum signals, all the overheads, and send it there, I'm going to use the sends. So on my last send slot on my two drum overheads, I'm using the last one because I want to keep the earlier ones free for effect sends, so I can do them all in the same line. But on my last two send slots, I'm going to hold Option Shift and set those to be parallel bus. Now, why is this input? What is this? Something's up. Input. Oh, what happened? Oh, I just did something stupid.
You open the bass track.
Yeah. So, parallel bus. Why is this inactive? Why is this inactive? Did I do something? Okay, cool. I accidentally right-clicked and made this inactive. Sorry. Apparently you can do that with sends and buses and stuff. You can right-click and make inactive on accident. So I'm going to undo that. Okay, cool. So first thing I need to do is expand the view of my parallel bus here. You guys know how to do that. You hold down Command and you click on the left side of this plate here. And then expand your send faders. I'm going to put these at unity gain really quickly by holding down Option and clicking on the fader. If you hold down Option and click on any fader or any knob, it'll turn it back to 0, back to unity gain or to like 0 centered panning or something. Like if I turn this different ways and I hit Option and click on that fader, it'll turn it back to 0. So that's a good little trick there. Anyway, so I've got my 100% of my overheads being sent into my drum parallel, which is kind of what I wanted. Now I'm going to put a compressor on my drum parallel track. I'm going to go with the BF76 because that's the only decent sounding compressor on the Pro Tools Basic plugins package. And I soloed my two overheads, and I'm going to go ahead and play my overheads. And then I'm going to turn up the input gain crazy loud. I'm going to turn my attack down a little bit so it's quicker to respond. And maybe change my ratio to be a little bit greater. Okay, so I have super heavy compression. You guys see that sucker just like pinned at like 10, 15 decibels of gain reduction. So that compressor's just pumping. I might make my release time a little bit quicker so it maybe recoils slightly. There it goes. You hear the difference between heavily compressed and not? See, it's just like in your face, like a wall of sound. Everything's just like blah, all up in your shit, all up in your grill. Okay, anyway, so that's overdone compression. But here's how I use it. I'm going to turn the drum parallel auxiliary input track all the way down. I'm going to go ahead and listen to my whole drum kit by itself, and then I'm going to slowly bring in my parallel compression to see what that does to my overall drum sound. So it kind of adds another element of intensity to the drum set. I also might use a filter to get rid of the lower stuff. Like the kick and the snare is really hitting the compression hard because it's a loud instrument. The kick and the snare are getting beat on and the cymbals are only so loud. So what I might do here is on my two overheads, on the first insert, I'm going to grab a EQ and I'm going to trim out the low stuff. Try to get rid of the snare and the kicks so much and the toms and just really focus on the cymbals so I'm not getting everything in there. So high pass filter, I'm going to go ahead and solo one of my overhead tracks here. Turn off my drum group so I can do that. Start my track over somewhere. So I've got so I can go to about here. Looks like about 700 hertz before I'm really affecting my cymbal sounds. I'm like at, what am I at? 700 hertz, with a gradual-ish cue. And that's taking out a lot of the kick, a lot of the body of the snare. But it's still got the cymbals pretty much unaffected because they're up there around 2K and above usually, most of it. So I'm going to copy that over to the other track so I have the same EQ on both left and right of my overheads. I'm going to solo both my overheads. I'm going to listen. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and solo my whole drum kit and listen as I add in parallel compression. So my cymbals, because they're so heavily compressed on that side chain parallel compression, I can bring those in either to just fill out the cymbal sounds and make it all, wall of sound, cymbal crashes kind of thing. Or I can use it as a way of building intensity throughout my song. So if I want more intensity during the second chorus or whatever I want to do, I can automate the volume of my drum parallel compression track. Here it is right here. I've got a volume automation line already set up in the view, and I can always bump during different choruses and verses. I can bring up the parallel compression to kind of enhance the urgency and the intensity of the drums, so it feels like the energy's been building from one section to another. So it's not something that you just do stagnant. It's something you can use to bring intensity and dynamics back into the mix after you've compressed and multi-track recorded and quantized everything and kind of sucked some of the life and variety out of it as far as dynamic range goes. So it's a tool, and a lot of people use it on cymbals. Heavy compression, you can have your raw, uncompressed cymbal overheads, and then you can do a parallel track where there's heavy-ass compression and mix those things to taste. Okay? So that makes sense. You kind of see how to do that. If you didn't, kind of watch the video again and check it out. But just another use of an auxiliary input track within my drum group family of instruments. Just another, routing, quick little routing, but via sends, so I can control how much signal and still preserve the two original overhead tracks that I have pan left and right. So, okay, cool. So I feel like my drum kit is more or less kind of done. I like a little bit of the overhead, or the compression, parallel compression stuff. It definitely brings an ambient room noise cymbal aspect to my drum kit, which I don't know how much I need yet because I don't hear the rest of the band. So I think the drums are in the ballpark. When I solo all my drums and I listen to it and I look at my drum sum, I can get an idea of where I'm at as far as levels of my entire drum family pushing through my one drum sum track. And it's pretty hot. My levels are up there almost peaking, which is a little too much. Also, I'm seeing a little bit higher of a signal on the left channel. You see how that's peaking while the right one isn't? That tells me I might have more of a level on my left overhead. You guys see your left overhead's a little hotter? Oops. Okay, so I'm trying to fix this with faders. I almost feel like I want to fix it with output of my EQ. If you look at your EQ up on your overheads, I'm getting red on my output. So I'm going to turn down both of them by 3 dB. These are my outputs on my reverb or my EQ plugins. I'm going to turn them both down by 3 dB just to start with. And then I'm going to turn down the left overhead to match on these 2 meters the output through this channel. So instead of turning down the fader, I'm going to turn down the plugin, the insert, because that's what's feeding this meter, and I can see the meters level out hopefully. So here's my overhead once again. Left overhead with the one that's hotter. I'm going to duck down the input a little bit. And now I've got my levels a little bit more matched. Maybe listen with headphones and see if you get an equal balance in left and right headphones. I'm not doing that, but I might try that just to make sure I've got, a balanced overhead, hard pan left and right situation going on in the earphones. It's kind of hard with speakers. You're kind of far away. You don't get the stereo image as clearly as you do with headphones, so I'm going to try that real quick. Okay, it seems pretty matched to me. It's matched on the meters here. You can see where your meter is kind of averaging around negative 15 dB. So that's evenly matched. I'm going to go back and solo my whole drum kit and look at my drum sum again to see where I'm at as far as my levels. A little bit better matched. See that? I'm more evenly matched with my overheads and my left and right channel outputs. You could throw a compressor on the whole drum kit. I don't know, see what it sounds like. One more level of compression on the drums as an entire group. Very subtle compression. If you're compressing something as important as your drum kit, you don't want to do crazy stuff. Really just thinking about boom chick here. Boom chick. I'm going to A and B it. I feel like it adds a little bit of punch. It adds some color too. Compressors, especially ones that are modeled after the 1176 compressor, this compressor colors the sound as well as compresses it. If you throw this thing on a channel, even if it's not even doing any gain reduction, you're going to hear a change in the color and the tone of the sound. It's probably going to get louder, so be a little bit bigger, bassier sounding anyway. So compressors like this will add and color the sound. It also kind of helps my dynamics a little bit. Maybe adds a little bit of pop and attack, because I have my attack time set a little bit slower, so the transient of the kick and the snare might get through before the compressor rolls on and turns the volume down. So it, you know, if you like it, cool. If you don't, maybe it's not right, but I did it. I think it's okay. And now I'm ready for the bass. So we're in the home stretch here. We got just a few more instruments to tune and dial in frequency-wise and compress before we kind of throw the whole mix up and balance drums against bass, against voice, against guitar. Okay, cool. So bass, next up is bass. And why am I hearing other things? Something is creeping in there. I'm trying to understand what that is. Something's weird. Okay, so something is not routed correctly. Bass bus, mix bus, output. Drums are bleeding. My drums go to the drum bus, which is right here. Drum bus goes to the mix bus. Some routing things going on. I'm kind of tripping out on what it. Oh, I think I solo saved my overhead. There we go. Yeah, I solo saved my overhead on accident, which means the overhead is going to never be soloed. Okay, cool. Back to bass. All right, sweet. So I'm going to duplicate the bass. I'll show you guys a little quick trick I do to kind of bring out the attack of a bass. If you want attacky bass. Attacky, not tacky, but attacky. It's a new word made up. It's an adjective. Anyway, I'm going to right-click and duplicate the bass track. And since I did it, it's already going to duplicate the sends and the routing. So it's already got the bass bus thing in its name. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the second bass track. I'm going to change the name to bass bite. I'm going to add some bite to the bass. That's what this track's all about, this duplicate track. And the other bass, I'm going to call it bass low. Because I'm going to go for some low aspects of the bass and some high aspects of the bass. So let's start with bass low first. Obviously, I'm focusing on the lower frequency aspects of the bass. And I'm going to do that by using what kind of filter? What's that? Low pass filter, LPF in the house. What up? All right. So it's just humpy bass. I'm liking the 120. It's got some nice kind of roundness to it, so I boosted around about 100 hertz there just because I like it. And I rolled off a lot of stuff, pretty much everything above 500 hertz. So I've got this bass that sounds like, you know, a kind of like Funk Brothers, super like round, no attack jazz bass kind of tone, if I'm not mincing words. After doing that EQ, I'm going to compress it and make this bass a little bit more punchier and heavier on the low end by compressing it heavily. Okay, that's the wrong thing. Okay, where'd my bass bus go? Or bass, there it is. Sorry, wrong thing. Okay, that doesn't work because it's a stereo plugin. Okay, so back to the bass. The second plugin is going to be the Bomb Factor 76. I'm going to turn my attack real quick. Then style it back. I'm going to make my release time pretty quick because I want the compressor to recoil. I'm watching my meter down here on the bass channel. I don't want to get too crazy with my output. So I've got a really funky, like, slow end bass that's compressed pretty heavily. Dynamically, it's going to be a little bit easier to control. I'm going to go to my bass light now, my bass bright, bass bite. I'm going to throw an EQ on it, and I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to kind of roll off the lower stuff, the low stuff. So you saw in the last plugin, I was basically rolling everything off under 500 roundabouts. So I'm going to do the same thing. This is like a crossover on a speaker where you like send only low frequencies below, 500 hertz to the subwoofer, and everything above 500 hertz is going to the tweeter. It's just basically a high pass, low pass filter sectioning off parts of the audio frequency to different parts of the speaker box. Same thing going on here. I'm just using two different tracks to do that, so I can control them individually and shape their tone and do whatever I want to do to balance it. So that's, I need more. Oh, there we go. There's some spank. So I've got a lot of cool sounding stuff that starts after my 200 hertz range. Now I'm going to fish for some of the attack and the bite. Looks like around 5K I've got some bite, some string fret noise, if you like that, in your bass tone. I'm going to leave some of that. And check this out. I'm going to add a little distortion to this. So I'm going to go to my bass bright track and go to the harmonic and put on the air distortion plugin and grab my mix knob and kind of find the sweet spot where I'm not adding too much distortion, but a little bit. So there we go. I ran it through a distortion plug and it's really buzzy and bright. But I'm going to see what those two things sound like together. I'm going to start with my low bass. I'm going to bring in my bright bass next to it. Okay, so it changed dramatically the sound of the bass, right? When you might have maybe liked the original sound of the bass. So hey, let's have the best of all worlds. I'm going to duplicate this bass track again. So another duplicate. This will be the third one. And this third bass, I'm going to call it bass clean. So I've got 3 bass tracks now. I'm going to turn off the plugins on and disable the plugins from that third bass track. What's up?
I got like a band that wants to record in there, and like they signed up earlier, but then like some dude came in and said there's like a music night thing going on, so I don't know.
Oh yeah, we're doing our jam session music night thing at 7. Oh, and there's somebody trying to record in there?
Tonight, yeah.
Did they sign in the book?
It did.
Oh shit. Well, I guess we'll have to jam in here.
So I was just trying to figure it out. So.
Yeah, I mean, if they signed in, they gotta do the thing. I gotta respect that. Okay, so check this out. I'm not too sure about my bassy bass, and I'm not too sure about my trebly distorted bass, but I want to have those options. So I've got 3 of them. One's the raw bass, the DI, which I will throw into a compressor maybe, just to get some tone and warmth out of it. Not a bad bass tone for a DI into a preamp. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up these other 2 bass tracks, the bass low and bass high, or bass bite, to kind of bring in some of those elements and accentuate the bassy bass and the buzzy, trebly aspects of it. So that adds some super low subby aspects to the bass, that low, and then the high one. Add some bite, which I can even maybe make more exaggerated by putting some more of that distortion. Turning up the mix is the percentage of the signal that's going through the plugin. Maybe that's too much. Anyway, so I've got 3 bass tracks now pumping through my bass sum, which now I think I'm going to put a limiter on my bass sum track so that I can make my bass level-wise perfectly even. I want my bass to always pump at the same dynamic range. I want to feel the bass boom, 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 boom all the time. You know, sometimes I just basically want to strip the dynamics out of the bass. That's basically what I'm doing here. And one way of doing that is to compress it or put a limiter on it, which basically sets a hard threshold that does not get passed. You basically set the highest volume of the sound, and the track will never go past that. So it's a great way to squash and take all the dynamics out of a sound, which is what I'm trying to do with this bass. So I go to my bass sum track, and I'm going to throw on a Maxim, which is the only limiter we have, except for the Dyne 3 compressor, which I don't know. We'll just use the Maxim. Okay, cool. So I've got Maxim up on my bass sum. Bass is soloed. I'm going to link these 2, threshold and ceiling, and I'm going to bring these down until I start getting attenuation. And I don't want to do too much attenuation. I kind of want to just... Okay, so I've got a decent amount of attenuation here. 5 dB, maybe I'll bring it up just a touch more. I'm going to undo the link and then turn up the ceiling a bit, which turns up my output. Now you can see my output level on my bass sum is about 10 dB. I got too much buzzy bass. I'm going to dial that back. Bring up a little bit of that low bass. Now I've got this bass that just like is always the same volume, always pumping, always blah 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 blah, like EDM bass, like it's always the same volume. It's just MIDI, so like there's no dynamic imperfections of a human playing an instrument. which is what you want. You want the thing to slap. You want the kick drum and the bass to be ooh, 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 boom, chick, boom, chick. You know, you don't want a bunch of quiet notes that kind of creep in every now and then. You don't want that fluctuation with things that make the booty shake and make the dance happen. So I've got those balanced. I feel like I like my bass. Now I'm going to balance the bass against the drums and see what they do together. So to do that, I'm going to unsolo anything. I'm basically going to, well, actually I solo everything. I'm going to solo the bass. And then I'm going to turn on my drum group and solo my drums. Oh, I can't do it. Shoot, it's not working. How about I create a bass group? I'm going to take my 3 bass tracks. I'm going to highlight them, select them, and then Command G, and I'm going to label this bass group. Or just call it bass. That's the name of the group. So I have a group that I can use to listen to my basses. And solo that, and then solo the drums. Why can't I do individually? Oh, I have to hold down Shift, sorry, to get both of these things to solo. And go back to my song. Bass is a little too hot, bring it down. Okay, that's a pretty good match. Okay, dynamically, bass and drums sound pretty good together. Let's go to guitars. Guitar 1. The guitars are pretty easy. With guitar tone, usually the guitar player's dialed in his tone ahead of time. Not a big deal. Sometimes you want a high-pass filter just to get rid of the low, muddy parts of a guitar tone if it's really dark and low, so it doesn't interfere with the rest of the band, like the bass or the keyboards. But we'll see what we got here. We've got Guitar 1, which is just playing rhythm and chords. Guitar 2 is just chords too. So they're basically the same guitar track. They're just different takes. That's what I did. I did one take, I played the chords. I did another take, I played different chords, but still just rhythm. So what I can do with the guitars is I can hard pan them left and right so I get a wide stereo sound to my mix and carve out space in the middle for the things like the guitar solo or the voice and the kick, snare, bass. So hard pan left and right my 2 guitar tracks. Okay, sweet. Guitar solos in the center. My guitars are all routed to a guitar bus or a guitar sum via a guitar bus. I might control the overall guitar tone with a little bit of a high-pass filter. So I'm going to throw an EQ on my guitar sum and maybe carve out some of the lower stuff of the guitar track. Okay, so as far as balancing frequencies, the reason I'm carving out the low part of the guitar, not that I like nasally guitar tone, it's just that guitars have a low register, a lot of low register aspects to them. You hit that low E string and you're basically playing a bass string. So you don't want too much butting up of frequencies. So I like to kind of make space for instruments so that I don't have to play that game of turning this up, turning that up, turning this down, turning that down. If they're in different frequency zones mainly, they can exist in kind of, happily exist with each other if their frequencies aren't bunching up on one another. So bass is down low. Most of the bass stuff is between 100 and 500 hertz. By guitar, I'm starting to roll off as it approaches 500. And that'll make it easier to mix and balance these things because their frequencies are out of the way. So I'm going to now solo the rest of the bass and drums so I can balance the dynamics of the guitars as well as the solo with the rest of the rhythm section. Okay, cool. I feel like that's fucking rocking. Damn. All right. Okay. See what I mean about those amp modeling things? Like, it took me like 25, 30 minutes to get that tracking done on 3 guitar takes rather than 3 or 4 hours setting up my amp in the living room and routing cables all over the place and trying to dodge like my roommates, being home. It was so much easier. And I don't miss it. It's not like it sounds super thin and weird and computerized. Not yet. Okay, cool. So vocals, real quick. Let's mix vocals. Yay. So I've got the vocal. I'm going to find a part of the voice where I'm actually singing. Probably a chorus or something. Loop a part of the chorus. First, I'm going to EQ. Get rid of the lows. The low part of my voice.
Searching for release in any way of mine. Shades of blue, green, black, and white. Now than I think it's ever been.
Take out the bassy part of my voice. I'm going to roll off 500. Narrow Q. Because I know 500 hertz is kind of a muddy, boxy area of the voice of anything. And I'm also going to find where the sibilance is, the articulations. Like the parts of my voice where I'm like pronouncing hard consonants and stuff. I'm going to find those spots in the voice.
A minute seemed like hours with no company.
So 4K's got some stuff.
I'm feeling about as lonely as a man can be.
So got some 4K bumped. I'm gonna find something else.
My baby's far away from home tonight. Shades of blue, green, black and white.
Maybe some of this looks like
it's hotter now than I think
6K.
it's ever been. It's hot as hell and so we're drinking. Searching for release in any way of mine.
I could probably just use one of these notch filters and just make it a wide Q, which kind of spans most of that frequency spectrum that I'm looking at. Basically everything from like 4 to 8 or 10. That's a lot of where the sibilance is, the articulations of a voice. So if you want more articulation, you want to be able to understand what the singer's saying, you can kind of boost those frequencies a bit. So right now the voice sounds a little thin,
Shades of blue, green, black and white.
but that's okay because it's going to have a giant rock band behind it. Now I'm going to compress the vocals pretty heavily. Grab the Bomb Factory 76 and really just pounce on this. But I got to find a part where I'm singing.
Thoughts of pondering the light.
About 5 dB of gain reduction, 5 to 10.
Watching shadows dance all across the walls. Shades of blue, green, black and white.
That's accentuating the articulations. The consonants are popping pretty good. My output volume's a little bit louder than it was.
Hotter now than I think it's ever been. It's hot as hell and so we're drinking.
Okay, cool. I'm going to go ahead and listen to the whole mix now.
Searching for release in any way of mine. Shades of blue, green, black and white.
Now I can do a rough mix of the entire thing. Real quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tear down the faders on my sum tracks. So if I look at my sum tracks, I have drum sum. I'm going to turn it all the way down. Bass sum, all the way down. Guitar sum, all the way down. And then my Vox track, all the way up on 0 unity. Because the voice is the most important thing. I'm going to mix around the voice. I'm going to start with voice. Bring in the drum kit.
With no company. I'm feeling about as lonely
Okay, drums and voice sound pretty good.
My baby's far away, away from home tonight.
I'm gonna bring up the bass a little bit.
Shades of blue, green, black and white.
And then the guitars.
It's hotter now than I think it's ever been. It's hot as hell and so we're drinking. Searching for releasing it.
Maybe take a little bit of the edge off the voice. It sounds a little thin. I'm gonna back off my high pass filter, warm it up.
Shades of blue, green, black and white.
So we want the guitar solo to be the same level as the voice, because when the voice is gone, the guitar solo takes the stage's center importance, whatnot. So anyway, that was a quick rough and dirty balance. I'll probably fix all that, but that's what we'll have for today. So go ahead and save. We'll quit there for the day. Any questions? Cool. The next thing we'll do is we'll set up effect sends for reverb, and we'll do kind of a re-listening and rebalancing things, maybe tweak some of our plugins, EQ, compression-wise, and just make sure everything's humming along really good. It sounds the way we want it to be. And then we'll go ahead and bounce this, and we'll have a pretty good, decent mix of this recording. And you guys can spend some time, like in class, kind of mixing it to your taste and using effects and whatnot. So, yeah, awesome. We're done for today. Great work, guys. We'll see you on Wednesday.